If you're rising juniors or seniors in high school, the SAT might seem like a daunting test. It's an important part of college admissions, and it should not be looked over. However, with preparation, I can assure you that you can achieve your desired score. In this video, I will give you 5 helpful tips to get that 800 on the SAT Math section. For a basic overview, the SAT Math section is the second of 2 parts of the SAT, the first of which being evidence-based reading and writing, and the second of which being math. The SAT Math section and SAT Reading and Writing section is out of 800, both of which making up the perfect 1600 score. The SAT Math section is divided into 2 parts, the Math No Calculator portion and the Math Calculator portion. For the Math No Calculator portion, there are 20 questions with a time limit of 25 minutes. Whereas for the calculator portion, there are 38 questions to be done in 55 minutes. The SAT Math sections cover a wide variety of topics relating to algebra, geometry, basic statistics and probability, etc. However, there are a lot more topics, so you should look up ahead of time the specific concepts that are covered to get a better understanding of what will be tested. Okay, so the first tip is to strategize the order in which you approach the questions. You might not know this, but the College Board usually makes it so that the last few questions in the math sections are tougher than the rest of the problems, while the first few are easier. Specifically for the no calc section, questions 14, 15, 19, and 20 are the hardest questions, and for the calc section, questions 28, 29, 30, 37, and 38 are the hardest questions. Just to be clear, questions 14, 15, 28, 29, and 30 are multiple choice questions, while questions 19, 20, 37, and 38 are free response questions. So personally, I would recommend that for the no calc section, so when you're doing the no calc section, right, I would say to do first questions 1 through 13, since they tend to be the easiest, then skip to the FRQ section and do questions 16 to 18, since those are the easiest free response questions. Then do questions 19 and 20, and then lastly do questions 14 and 15. This is because if you're running out of time, you need to get as many points as possible. For the SAT, each question is 1 point. They're all equal. So no questions weighed more than any other. So in this case, you want to just get as many points as possible. So doing the easiest questions first will allow you to get as many points as possible. Also, you should do the hard FRQ problems first, since if you have to guess on questions 14 and 15 if you don't have time, at least you have a 25% chance of getting it right, rather than a 0.000001% chance with the free response questions. So similarly for the calc section, I would say to do questions 1 through 27 first, since those are the easiest or like the average multiple choice questions. Then skip to the free response section and do questions 31 through 36. Then do the hardest free response problems, which are 37 and 38, and then go back and do the hardest multiple choice problems, which are questions 28, 29, and 30. By strategizing the order in the questions you tackle, you can ensure that you get as many questions right as possible and maximize your score. The second tip is when finding the slope of the line that is not in y equals to mx plus b form, which is just slope-intercept form, but rather in the standard form, or ax plus by equals c, where a is a coefficient, b is a coefficient, and c is a constant, the slope is simply negative a over b. This concept is presented in the SAT often, and it would save time if you know this trick. For example, imagine if you have a question that asks which equation has a parallel slope to the equation represented above, and let's say the equation is 2x plus 3y equals to 4, right? And your answer choices are 4x plus 6y equals to 8, negative 2x plus 3y equals to 4, 6x plus 4y equals to 8, and let's say 3x plus 2y equals to 4. Alright, so you could manipulate each answer choice by doing simple two-step equations, and that would get you to the slope-intercept form, but that would take a lot of time. Instead, if you know that the parallel slope just means the same slope, you can simply use negative a over b to see that the slope of the line represented above would be, in this case, since you could substitute a and b for, well, a in this case is 2, so it's negative 2 over b, which is 3. So the slope of this line is equal to negative 2 over 3. Now, if you look at each of the answer choices, you see that choice A has a slope of negative 4 over 6, and if you simplify that, that's negative 2 over 3 as well. So choice A has a parallel slope to the equation represented above. If you want, you could check each of the other answer choices, and you would get that choice B has a slope of 2 over 3, choice C has a slope of negative 6 over 4, which is equal to negative 3 halves, and choice D has a slope of negative 3 halves as well. So there you go, choice A is your answer, and it took a lot less time. The third tip I have is to make sure to know your formulas. They do give a formula sheet on the SAT math sections, but not all formulas are portrayed, and it would take a bunch of additional time to flip back between your questions and the formula sheet. For instance, formulas such as the circle formula, or x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, is used in various problems to find the center coordinates of the circle as well as the radius. This is not on the formula sheet though, given on the SAT, so it's really helpful to know these formulas beforehand through practice. The fourth tip I have is, when practicing, focus on your weaknesses and write the problem out to understand why you got each question wrong. Not all topics are covered equally, so you need to make sure that you know that certain topics appear on the test more often than others, and it's better to understand your weaknesses beforehand, and I would recommend that you focus on main topics or your more prominent topics on the SAT before covering minute or topics that won't show up as often. If you're looking for practice, Khan Academy is a great tool to practice SAT math and to focus on your weaknesses, since it has a basic layout for your progress throughout your practicing, and it kind of highlights which topics you are struggling on and which topics you are better on as well. It provides a ton of practice problems on pretty much every concept, but it is pretty hard. It's typically harder than the SAT math problems you'll see. So I would recommend also using the College Panda math textbook, or not necessarily a textbook, but it's more like a practice book. And that provides a ton of practice problems on every concept, and it's typically what you will see on the SAT math section as well. So let us know in the comments below if you'd like to see a video about the resources we would recommend when studying for the SAT, since we've already gone through this before. So just let us know in the comments or like the video so we know that you would like to see that. The fifth tip I have is that if you're able to, practice so that you have time to check your work on each answer before submitting. So, especially for math, it's easy to make simple miscalculations on both sections, even though you might have a calculator, or if you do not have a calculator. So you might make simple mistakes on the, just the algebra, or just flipping signs, maybe adding a negative where it shouldn't be there, or a positive when it should be negative. So it's important to check your work before submitting your SAT. I would say this for both the reading and writing as well as the math, but it's more important to check your math rather than the reading and writing because it's easier to make mistakes on math. So the last thing you want is for your SAT to drop due to just minor calculation mistakes or maybe even bubbling in the wrong answer accidentally. So make sure to also check your bubble sheet. So check your bubble sheet. Since on the SAT, you don't put your answers just on the paper or the test booklet. They give you a separate bubble sheet where you bubble in all your answers, so it's just easier for them to grade it. And you put your work on the test booklet. The work is optional, but you have to bubble in those correct answers. And the last thing you want is that you get a question wrong just because you bubbled in the wrong bubble. So just make sure that you practice this if you have time. Alright, so I actually have a bonus mini tip, which is to make sure you're familiar with your calculator. As although you can do the entire calculator section without a calculator, believe it or not, being familiar with your calculator will severely lessen the amount of time taken on strenuous calculations. For instance, there's quite a lot of questions about the mean, median, and standard deviation of various data sets, and typically these are like application problems. However, if you try to do this just through hands-on calculations, yes, you could do that. However, for the standard deviation, I'm not really sure how you can do that, but for the mean and median, definitely you can do that. But sometimes they would give data entries with more than 10 to 15 data entries. And definitely you don't want to waste any extra time that you could be using on a tougher problem. So definitely use your graphic calculator. That makes so much less time spent on that one question. And there are specific data methods on your graphic calculator that you can use, and it'll take basically a few seconds to finish. You don't have to take any extra time on any strenuous or tedious calculations, and to be honest, it's just a lot easier. Personally, I use a TI-84 plus CE graphic calculator, and this worked out just fine for me because it tailored to my likings, since I used that calculator for all of high school, typically my math and science classes. However, that's not the only calculator you could use, and by doing research, you could find a calculator that might suit your likings more. I know that some people use Casio calculators or maybe just another version of the TI calculator. Just make sure though that your calculator aligns with College Board's rules and regulations on the types of graphic calculators you can use on the SAT. The whole point of the SAT math calculator section is to show your intellectual capabilities to use your graphic calculator to help you solve math problems. But if you have a calculator that does all the work for you, well, that's not really showing your capabilities as an intellectual. So the last thing you would definitely want is for your calculator to be taken away on test day, since it's not allowed by College Board. So just make sure that whatever calculator you are buying or investing in for this SAT, just make sure that it aligns with their rules and regulations. Thank you guys so much for watching. If this helped you, like the video and subscribe for more content. Leave your comments down below if you have any questions or any ideas as to what videos we should make, and we'll see you guys in the next video.